Hello and welcome to Sustainability Leads, the podcast where we engage with sustainability leaders in South Africa. My name is Achieng Ojuang and I'm your host today. I have with me a guest from Sanlam today, Mr. Abel Sakhau. Abel, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks, Doc, and happy to be here.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Following a very busy week in South Africa with the B20 and the G20. I'm still standing.
Absolutely. I'm still trying to get over the B20 process and the G20. But well done to South Africa. We're going to start off on point. And I know I've introduced you as Abel, but I need you to introduce yourself. Tell us who you are in more depth and how you got to this journey of corporate sustainability.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's been a long journey. I think, I got exposed to, at that time we didn't even call it sustainability, but more environmental management. Because I studied at TVET, 1994, and I did quite odd subject combinations. I studied geography before it was called the School of Environmental Science. I did archaeology, but I also had an interest in politics. I also did international relations.
Okay.
So that was my combination. And I really enjoyed studying geography, which I then specialized in climatology at my honors year. And I was fortunate enough to be employed as a consultant to start a new unit focusing on atmospheric science and air quality consultancy with Wormsley Environmental Science. And that's when my passion and growth in the field started, because there weren't many people who looked like me, black, who were doing what we were doing at that time. And ever since then, it's been a very amazing journey. Worked for government in municipal level, which was a bit of a frustration because, I'm quite a driven person, and government processes sometimes can slow you down. And then I joined the mining company Exao, where I spent 17 years of my career there. Moving across different aspects of sustainability and safety, because mining safety is quite important. And now I'm with financial services, so quite a transition from financial sector to, from mining to financial sector. And where I come from, grew up in Soweto, born and bred in Soweto. And even now I'm still staying in the south.
Yes.
And people say, but why are you still staying in the south? Why can't you go to the north? They don't understand that if you grow in Soweto, you always want to stay there.
Home is home.
Home is home, Yeah, it's about 15 minutes drive from my current house to where home is.
Okay, so that is really over 20 years for you in the sustainability field, and you've grown with it.
Yep.
Studying bits and pieces of it and then growing into the role. But what has that sustainability transition like in companies been like? Because it started very fuzzily, at some point, understood only from an environmental perspective.
Yeah.
But now that has changed and the understanding has really broadened. But what is your experience of how this has matured in companies? What has changed?
I think, sustainability was big in mining. And its genesis was more from a safety perspective and the impact that came with, digging a hole on the ground. And it was legislative driven and regulation driven. Hardcore legislation and regulations to try to regulate the impact that mining had on the environment. And at that time, I think I found that the work that we're doing was more of a tick box and compliance. We knew when the inspector is going to come, we needed to make sure all the files are ready. And I think post 2010, leading up to the Paris Accord, you started seeing a shift, where sustainability was directly linked to, core business metrics, to say it's actually more on the value side.
Yes.
Because suddenly we could realize that while we've been taking away from the earth and the environment without paying back, we realized that we are actually getting into challenges, the theory of the planetary boundary being overshot. To say we cannot continuously be borrowing from the environment without putting it back. And that actually then led to this shift to say actually sustainability should be integrated in business strategy. And it should be seen as a part of the value drivers, for a business. And it should be spoken from a financial terms. And one of the challenges that I think I pick up from us as sustainability practitioners is that we love our science with passion. And we tend to use words that intimidate people who don't understand the technical aspects of our education. And you find that in meetings, we tend to use those technical terms, like we started with global warming, then we went to climate change, and we use so many big terms that people get lost, especially in businesses, because business operates with two principles, cost, revenue. Yes. If something doesn't belong in any of those, then they probably, business leaders tend to think, why should I be doing it if it's not helping me to reduce my cost and it's not helping me to increase my revenue so that I can become profitable? Then I learned at that time when I was still at Exao to say, you have to talk the language of business. It's not a water pollution, it's reducing the cost of paying fines related to polluting the water. And that makes sense to them, to say, if you manage your water quality, you're going to be able to reduce the cost that is going to be levied for you.
Yeah. So, and that's an interesting point that you make, because it's taken us a while to be able to even have the data to prove that sustainability is good for the bottom line. In what other ways, from your experience, are we now able to make that statement that sustainability matters?
Yes, definitely, definitely. I think there are certain legislative and regulations that are helping us. In South Africa, for example, we can talk about the carbon tax. Yes. Now suddenly we can put a price to emitting carbon. And also because we're now spreading the responsibility across. It's not only from a polluter perspective. Even when you buy a car today in South Africa, you pay carbon tax. Every single person who owns a car in South Africa pays carbon tax. Whether it's embedded in the price of a car or whether in the fuel tax, it's there, And also, with companies now realizing that we cannot continuously be borrowing from the environment, and then we start seeing the damages. Especially now when I'm in the financial sector, with insurance, you clearly can see the impact of floods. Because you suddenly see a spike in your premium payouts, because suddenly you have to pay for the claims, associated with those floods. So you can't deny it, to say if we don't manage sustainability activities and integrate them into strategy, as a business, you're flying blind because you don't know what is coming to your environment from a business perspective that can erode your ability to generate value.
Yes. So other than legislation, are there other experiences or turning points that have pivoted us to the next level of performance? What are those?
I think, in history, you do have those moments where you've got the person who the media loves, a creator, is it Thambak, who led the whole climate change activism. And because she was young, she related to a certain population group globally. And you then started young people starting becoming conscious, and we went into that age of consciousness where people started thinking, you know, the type of milk I'm buying, the type of clothing I'm buying, where is it coming from? Is it coming from the sweatshops? You know, you started having young people becoming interested to say, what is it that we are consuming? And what is the impact of what we are consuming? And now companies started saying, we now have another stakeholder that we have to satisfy in terms of how we do business. Because that particular stakeholder has got the power to decide if they want to come and join us from a skill perspective, if they want to work for us, and whether that stakeholder is willing to buy our products. So companies started having to deal with it to say, how then do we transform our culture so that it can be attractive to those people who are actually asking difficult questions about how we conduct our business.
You know, for me, it was the financial crash of 2008, 7 there. So before that, whenever we, you know, spoke or engaged companies on sustainability, you are pushed to say, so why should I, the companies would ask, why should I do this stuff? What is the business case? What is in it for me? And then the financial crash happened and they were like, okay, how do we do it?
Yes.
So for me, I think that is one of those turning points. And I think there have been many.
Yes.
Like you're talking about carbon tax, you're talking about this massive global push, but also I think the global advocacy. And so I think as organizations, sometimes we gain momentum when there are big triggers.
Yes, definitely.
And big pushes. But so there's a lot of reporting that companies have to undertake as part of the sustainability journey. There are metrics that companies rely on. Many times, I think the single most communicated burden is the burden of reporting.
Yep.
But if you look at the African continent or companies in the continent, and when it comes to really you know, performing and measuring progress, do you think that there are specific metrics that are just relevant for the African continent? What is big when you look across all those matrices?
Yeah, I think also, Doc, you know, how the whole landscape of sustainability also came about, you know, coming more with the dominance of our global north partners.
Yes.
We ended up thinking sustainability equates to climate change and emissions. You know, we thought, oh, that's the equation for sustainability. And when then you came to the continent, it didn't mean anything. We've got countries in the continent who, you know, 99% of their electricity comes from renewable source, hydro. So when you start talking to them about emissions, then it doesn't make sense. They can't relate to it. But I think for you know, from a Africa perspective, you know, the S part, the social aspect of sustainability is critical. You know, because that's where we can deliver most of our value. We've got a young population that everyone raves about, innovation. So the metrics for me that, you know, if African governments can focus on and in business, you know, is on education, for example. You know, how do we make sure that we can keep children engaged in schools? You know, South Africa every year we publish stats in terms of, you know, when kids start school, by the time they get to grade 12, we've lost almost 50% of those children. What happened to them? We don't keep that matrix, you know. And for me, it's very important because that's where we can unlock value. Because it then can help us to make sure that we can drive programs that can push for innovation. And, but it's not only education that focuses on university outcomes. And that's where the danger is. is education that focuses on vocational studies for me. Education that technical studies, you know, the whole aspect of AI. How do we make sure that we build more capacity into that particular sector? You know, because I think that's where the future is, you know, to say, yes, you can have as many lawyers as possible, you know, but you will never have enough plumbers.
Yes.
You know, the equation is there. You can never have enough plumbers. You know.
But, you know, as we are growing up and what we become to understand as the measures of success is going to university.
Yes.
And now you're saying maybe that should not be. How do we redevelop and communicate new measures of success? How do we even define that so that people see value, young people see value in vocational training? Because that is ultimately a big part of what drives economic growth, when you have those skills that the economy needs. And yet we've been taught, my child, you must go to the university, get a PhD.
Because what we also consume in terms of media, and now social media, you know, people talk TikTok and Instagram. Fortunately, I'm not on those ones, so I'm still learning. Is that we also equate success with people who dress in suits and go to offices and sit in boardroom. That's what, when you watch a movie, that's what you see representing success. You know, and they will always, when, you know, in their house, if there's something that they need to be taken care of, they will call a plumber, you know, or they will call a handyman. But the handyman doesn't come in suits, you know, so the impression is then created to say, actually, this guy works for the other guys, you know, the guy in the suit. Whereas the guy who comes to fix our challenges at our houses, you know, that might be the richest guy.
Oh, yes.
But that part of the story is not told, you know. And I think those are types of narratives that we need to start putting out there. And also for government to make being a tradesman sexy, you know, and putting more money into that, to say, how then do we create the balance that's going to force kids to go into that, you know. I'm not saying defund universities. Universities are good for research. But you also want to make sure that you can balance it to where the economy is supposed. Like Germany, if you go to Germany, most people are tradesperson, you know, because they know they have a huge industrial complex that requires that particular skill, you know. And in South Africa, we jokingly say, you know, if you need a tradesman, you have to find someone from Zimbabwe, you know, because that's where most of those emphasis happened in early post-Zimbabwean liberation, to say, put more people into those. That's why today in South Africa, when you're looking for a tradesman, you're probably going to find a Zimbabwean who's going to be a good plumber, good electrician, you know, because they invested into those sectors.
So then what are we missing in South Africa? Where are we getting it wrong, so to speak?
I think we got it wrong after our democracy, you know, to be frank and honest. We used to have those skills. I went to a primary school and I was taught bricklaying. I was taught a simple electrical circuit at primary school. And democracy came and all of those technical and vocational schools were closed. And only now that we are realizing, that's why we now even call them something different, which it still baffles me. Why are we calling them TVET colleges? You know, because those things were there. You are calling them something as if they are new.
What were they called in the past?
Vocational schools.
Okay.
They were called vocational schools. Why can't we call them what we are used to? So that we can relate as parents to say, oh, yeah, it's a vocation. And now TVET sounds as if it's something, if your child failed to get into university, the next best thing to do, instead of roaming around the streets, take the child to TVET centers.
So we are not putting the right value to vocational training.
We are not putting the right value to vocational training. And the reason it was called vocational training is because it had value in society. We knew if you want an electrician, you know, early 1994 and pre-1994, if someone comes and say, I've got an N6 from a vocational school, you know exactly what it means. You know, you needed to actually understand that's where you get your tradesmen. You know, but today
And sometimes I see the tension between what the market expects and the pressure that we are putting on universities, because academics will tell you the universities are a place for producing knowledge and research, but business is saying we need appropriate graduates you must produce for the market, and most academics will tell you, but that's originally not what our responsibility as universities. We are a space for producing knowledge, for driving research, and that's who we should be. But that has changed, and we are now expecting that the universities produce everything.
Yeah, so it's a numbers game.
It's a numbers game.
It's a
and
numbers
the universities are crowded. But just moving forward, South Africa is just coming out of an excellent delivery of the G20. We were part of the B20, and we've been really preoccupied with that by and large for most of this year. And from what we were seeing, it was a great success. So well done, South Africa. But as Sanlam, Sanlam has been closely tracking the B20 proposals, and you'll be doing that, if I'm right, in the next 3 years. Is it? Do you have a tool to do that?
So what we did, we went back. We published a report where we looked at Indonesia, India, and Brazil, the post 3-year cycles of the B20. And we looked at what actually makes some of those recommendations to work. And also to be carried through the G20. So we published a report on that. And there were a couple of things, you know, they needed to be alignment between the B20 focus and the G20 focus. And you needed to have a strong task force chair, and you needed to address a global issue. Because this it's not about South Africa, it's about a global...
It's about 20.
Yes, 20 odd countries. And you probably would pick up, even when they were said they have, by consensus, have accepted the declaration. You know, it's more the issues of global significance, you know. And I think as Sanlam, you know, given the fact that, you know, from a financial institution perspective, we can see the challenges that are confronting the African countries in particular, where in some cases even insurance penetration is very low. And you look at where people from a continent identify with the assets that they have. And then you ask the question, you know, if this person, the only asset they have is an RTP, and that RTP is not insured, what happens if they lose that RTP? You know, are they then quickly brought back to poverty category? And we then looked at to say, you know, if the B20 needs to be meaningful on the continent, you know, we have to understand what is the recipe for success, you know, from that perspective. And our research was quite insightful in terms of some of the things that needed to be done. And also to show that, you know, in Indonesia and India and Brazil, the importance of legacy projects. And we then asked the question, what is the commitment of business? You know, to say, let's assume government says we don't like your B20 recommendation, we're not taking any of them. What is the commitment that business is putting forward to say, these are our recommendations, we believe in them, let's then go and fund them to make sure that they become reality, you know? And it was encouraging that business actually said, despite what's going to happen in terms of whether they will be adopted, a business is going to have quite strong legacy projects that are going to take forward.
Absolutely. So, but how well, in your view, are those proposals aligned to African priorities? given that we grounded them
Yeah.
Locally, and as you're saying, whether they made the way to the G20 final document or not, business must be committed because that is what is relevant to South Africa. So are you saying there's great alignment?
There was a good alignment. One of the recommendations that actually got stuck with me, I think came from a finance and infrastructure tech, where they identified that, you know, Africa does not have a shortage of viable projects that can be funded. But the funding is not coming.
Okay.
You know, the funding is not coming. And I think even at the G20, you know, they call it fancy words, debt sustainability, the risk. You know, how do African countries viewed from a financial risk perspective? You know, we're still using the old method of evaluating risk when you look at projects happening on the continent, you know. But the other thing also that also came out, you know, to say, also African businesses, it's good to say funding is not coming to us, you know, but where are we investing our pension funds?
Yes.
As business? You know, are we taking our money offshore and expecting the global north to bring their money here? Also, African pension funds were also challenged to say, you have to also start investing on the continent so that our visitors, when they see that we've got confidence in our economies, they can also then help support and put more. You know, just that change in mindset, and I think it's been, you know, our discussion even today to say, you know, it's all about the mindset. You know, to say African pension funds have got lots of money.
Absolutely.
But it's not invested in those projects that we want to harness so that we can drive economic growth.
Yeah, so it worries me that there are sentiments that we don't have fundable projects, and yet we have the greatest opportunities, even just in terms of infrastructure, in terms of connecting the continent. So why that statement, or is it a lack of collaboration because there's need for scale? So maybe there needs to be cluster countries thinking together about those big projects.
It's probably also how rating agencies see African projects. And because also we do have investment within an investment house in Sanlam. One of the things that we started doing would refer to the MSCI guidelines in terms of evaluating risk. But we have our own bespoke method that we use, you know, to say we are closer to the truth.
Yes.
You know, MSCI is quite far from the truth in terms of understanding what happens. So we will then balance the risk that we get from an MSCI-led model to our own internal model, and we are able then to fund some of these projects that ordinarily wouldn't be funded if you're only using your predefined models that are used by most investors. So I think that is very important also to say Africa also needs to start driving the movement towards how do we rate risk on the continent, you know, because we would look at things like, you know, the governance of a business.
Yes.
You know, who sits in the board? You know, do they have a track record? Are they diverse? And diversity for us does not only mean men and women, it also means age, education in that particular board. But also, what is the impact of that business in society? You know, does it create jobs?
Yes.
You know, does it support economic growth of the country? So once you then start putting those things together, then you get an outcome that says, there is no way this business is going to fail. You know, this is a business that is rooted in this economy. Yes. This is a business that the people who are governing this business are going to make sure that it's properly well governed. And then you start seeing risk from a different perspective.
Yeah. And you know, if you look at the recommendations, especially from the Finance and Infrastructure Task Force of the B20, in relation to ratings, the proposal says, the recommendation says, we need to avail more data. And my understanding is that so that Africa is not just rated based on perceptions, but that there's evidence that can support the decisions and considerations that the raters and even investors would make. But we are in a season where research and development institutions will tell you that they're seeing a dip in funding, and yet Africa needs the data. So how do we do this? How does business support more data generation and development?
And I think also there's also a positive in a sense, but also a negative. You look at the opportunities that will be presented by AI. I think this is where African business and governments needs to wake up and urgently invest in AI, because we're going to end up with the same situation where we are. You know, if more AI models are created in the global north, you can then assume in terms of you know, the regenerative aspect of those models from a perception perspective, to say if Africa can also take a lead in terms of developing their own AI models that understands our context, you know, because in the near future, you know, the risk models will be done through AI. You know, but are we spearheading that revolution and innovation to say, how then do we make sure that those models also get the data to be able to come up with a proper analysis of a particular project? If we are still thinking about, oh yeah, we've got a youthful population, if we can take it to school, but we are not investing in AI today.
Which will be much simpler, much faster, automated.
Much simpler, automated, because you know, you can go to any AI model and say there's a project happening in Kenya, you know, it's done by company X. You know, how do I evaluate the risk for that particular company? If the AI model does not understand the opportunities presented by a company that employs 100 people and a company that employs 10 people, to say, from a risk perspective, you want a company that employs 100 people, because then it tends to then start dealing with the socio-economic challenges that are presented by unemployment and an unemployed youth, you know. So you then have a different risk outlook, you know, from two companies. You know, but we are not spearheading that and putting that data up front. You know, and AI, I think, is our opportunity for Africa to leapfrog some of those challenges.
We are leapfrogging again, the way we leapfrogged from, what were they called? House phones to cell
landlines. The landlines.
Okay, as a final point, Abel, you are in the public domain as an advocate of long-termism. You know, talking about, you know, political cycles are short-term, those are maybe 4 or 5 years. CEO terms are also about the same time. How do we balance long-termism with short-term pressures on business when you think about sustainability?
Yeah, I think we have to decouple, especially in businesses, we have to decouple sustainability practices and embedment from the CEO's office. Yes, the CEO can set a tone, and but if the organization does not understand why we're doing what we are doing, when the CEO leaves, he leaves with that particular focus. And our approach should be, how do you start to embed sustainability? Even a person who cleans, the person who washes dishes in companies, they understand that if a tap is leaking, I have a responsibility to phone maintenance and call them and say, the tap is leaking, because they understand unattended tap that is leaking means at the end of the year, the cost to run a company is going to be high. It's a basic knowledge from me and you, you know, but for that person, you have to take them through the journey. And once then you've achieved that from an organizational perspective, the term of a CEO becomes irrelevant, because the practices are part of your culture.
So embed it into the business. Let's make sustainability embedded into our daily lives as well, into everything that we do. Thank you, Abel. On that note, I'd like to just say very big thank you for making the time to engage with us today. And that brings us to the end of our podcast. Until next time, thank you.